Hey guys, welcome to Chapter 10 of Readings from Gift of the Shaper. I'm your host, DL Jennings. Thanks for joining us. Let's get into Chapter 10. This takes place in the Talvin forest, northeast of Lusk, and is told from the POV of Thornton. The sun had just passed overhead and was beginning its slow descent to the west. They had been following the tracks for a few hours, every now and then stopping for Kethris to survey the area and point things out to Thornton. Kethris made him listen for the sound of birds, saying that it meant there was probably water nearby. Running water was better than standing water, and standing water was better than no water, he said. Each time they came to a clearing, they would stop and let the horses graze, while Kethris pointed out features of the tracks that they were following and asked Thornton to tell him what he saw. "This horse has a chipped front left hoof. You can see it here," Thornton said, pointing to a print. "Good," Kethris answered. "And?" He scanned the area. "They slowed down here," he said, pointing ahead. "How can you tell?" "The tracks are closer together." Kethris nodded. "There is one more thing that you should notice." Thornton looked around the area, carefully inspecting the tracks. He frowned and scratched his head. Glancing back and forth, he put his hands up in defeat. "Look over here, where the tracks are all clumped together. This horse came to a stop. Then the tracks from the same horse are shallower," Kethris said. Thornton nodded. He looked over the tracks in silence. Coming up with nothing, he looked at Kethris for help. "What would make the tracks shallower?" Kethris asked, not wanting to give the answer directly. Thornton grimaced and looked at the tracks again, hoping that inspiration would suddenly strike. It did not, and he looked again at Kethris. The Kinari eyed him up and down, settling finally upon his hammer, which was strapped to his back. "Take a step and look at your tracks," he said. Thornton did as he was told. "Now put your hammer on the ground and take another step." He did so, standing it on its head so that the handle was facing the sky. When he looked at his shallower tracks, his face flushed red. "They rid themselves of whatever they were carrying," he said to the ground. "And this is the most important part," Kethris said, ignoring his embarrassment and pointing nearby. "A new set of footprints." Inara turned to Mira and whispered, "He'll take any opportunity to show off." The stifled laughter from both of them drew a stern look from Kethris. "The tracks split here," he continued. "3 going this way, to the southwest, and the rest going off to the east." Standing up, he said, "If you can tell me which direction we should follow, I won't make you catch your own dinner tonight." Thornton looked carefully at the tracks. His eyes went back and forth over the hoof prints and the footprints. He stood up and looked at Kethris, his eyebrows arched in a look of uncertainty. "East?" "Inara," Kethris said over his shoulder. "The poor boy will starve," she said as she approached them. "The new tracks lead southwest, toward Lusk." Thornton put his hands in his face. He was not looking forward to hunting tonight. They kept the sun in front of them as they traveled, always keeping an eye on the tracks. Kethris walked beside Thornton, who rode atop Jericho, and Inara walked beside Mira. Neither of the Kinari had asked to ride, and Thornton was fairly certain they wouldn't have wanted to. And, despite how subtle he thought he was in staring at the Kinari, Thornton was surprised when Kethris asked, "Is something the matter?" without even taking his eyes off the trail. Thornton jerked his eyes away quickly when he knew that he was caught. "Sorry, it's just, I thought Kinari were only stories. I still can't believe you're real." This caused a hint of a smile to appear on Kethris's lips. "We do not venture much outside the forests of Kianar, it is true. Has it really been that long?" Thornton looked puzzled. "That long?" "Humans and Kinari have not always been strangers." His voice sounded distant as he spoke. "No doubt the stories you've heard are evidence of this. Once, we walked among you." "What happened?" Thornton asked. "The kith happened." He spat, like he'd taken in a mouthful of poison. Thornton was quiet, but the curiosity that showed on his face urged Kethris to continue. He drew in a deep breath and exhaled it loudly, hesitating. "Our mother is very old," he started. "She was old even when humans were young. She watched them as they grew, as they multiplied, and as they became enlightened. She watched them when they first felt the energy that is abundant in the other world. Unlike Kinari, who are children of this world, humans are children of both. Their bodies are merely vessels for the energy inside them, which comes from the other world. When humans were young, it was only their dreams that connected them to the other world. They were never meant to control that power. The energies that exist in the other world are the powers of creation and destruction themselves." He paused to look at the sky, which was starting to become red and purple as the sun sank lower and lower in front of them. "But the draw of power is not easily ignored. From the other world came whispers with promises of power, promises of mastery over the energy that shaped the world. Its pull was too strong and humans were too weak. What they wanted was mastery over life and death. The true danger, though, was getting what they wanted." He sighed as if the retelling was hard. "To have the power over death, they embraced the breaker. They became death, and there was no room left for their humanity. Our mother saw the darkness in them, and it made her sad and afraid for her children. She knew that humans had tasted the breaker's power and would only spread his destruction to all that they touched. She could not stop them, so she withdrew. She took her children and left. But you humans, you saw it too. Those of you that embraced the darkness were forced out and set apart. They were the first kith." "Was that what caused the shaping war?" Thornton asked quietly. "Yes, because no matter how great the power of death, it will always be but a part of life. And a small pocket of humanity cried out for life, turning their backs on the kith, who once had the audacity to call themselves human. They cried out against the power that their own blood had embraced. Though they could not know it, their cries reached the ears of the Shaper of Ages herself, and she listened. Knowing she could never erase the mark that the Breaker had laid upon humanity, she gave up her own power in response, abandoning the other world for this one, and empowering the Athrani, those touched by the Shaper herself. Using the gift she gave them through her very being, they struck down the kith and pushed them out, pushed them away, into the depths of Kala Valur." "That was a long, long time ago," said Mira. "So long that most of us had forgotten it ever happened." "Humans do not have long memories," Inara said flatly. "But the Athrani are still young," Kethris continued, "and think highly of themselves. They think themselves greater than humans, but conveniently forget that they were once human too. They only have to look to the kith to see what they are capable of." Thornton pondered this quietly as the sun sank below the horizon and left just a sliver of the moon to light their path. So there you go. There's chapter 10. It was pretty short, really, by even my standards, and I have a lot of short chapters in here. But basically, we get a lot of exposition from Kethris. So this was like an origins chapter, sort of explaining the differences between the Athrani and the Kith and where they came from, and how the Kinari's mother, or as they just refer to her as the mother, how she watched humanity sort of split off into these two different sects, the Athrani and the Kith, the two magic users whose power is derived from the other world. So I hope you enjoyed that chapter. Stick around for chapter 11 coming up next, and I'll see you guys next time.